The more and more I get into overlanding, the more I wonder about how it all began. Overlanding has become quite popular, particularly in the last few years. There are different interpretations of what the term means, but I think what people generally agree upon is that it's vehicle-supported, self-reliant adventure travel. Today, when we hear the term overlanding, most of us probably envision something like a fully kitted out Toyota or Land Rover or whatever brand vehicle, traveling in scenic remote areas where the adventure seekers seem to always find the most spectacularly epic campsites for the night, and then do it all again in another area the very next day. At least, that's how I more or less picture it. What has now seemingly become six-figure rig builds, on social media anyways, actually had very humble beginnings, born out of necessity, not the pursuit of adventure. And it didn't even involve motor vehicles. Welcome to the first episode of I've never thought about that. Today we're talking about the Overland origin story, a brief history of overlanding. Over 100 years ago, overlanding was a term used by Australians to describe driving cattle over extremely long distances to either find new grazing pastures or to take the cattle to market. Perhaps the most historically famous overlanding route is a track known as the Canning Stock Route that was opened in the western region of Australia sometime around 1910. This 1,900-kilometer track, that's 1,180 miles for us Yanks, was commissioned by the government of Western Australia, who appointed Alfred Canning to survey the route. Apparently, the Canning Stock Route was commissioned to break a monopoly that Western Kimberley cattlemen had on the beef trade at the beginning of the 20th century.
All of the Western beef trade belongs to me. Ha ha ha.
Not if I have anything to say about it.
Oh bugger.
Today, the route is known as one of the toughest 4x4 tracks in the entire world, with only one fuel stop somewhere along the way as you traverse over 900 sand dunes. Most people allot at least 21 days to complete this iconic track. If we fast forward a couple decades, Len Bedell, a surveyor and road builder, constructed many of the roads that opened up the Australian outback in the 1940s and 1950s. Most of these roads are still used today by Australian overlanders and have kept their original names like the Gun Barrel Highway, the Connie Sue Highway, named after Len Bedell's daughter, and the Ann Bedell Highway, named after his wife. But those stories don't really explain how motor vehicles became part of what we now call overlanding. For that piece of the puzzle, we'd have to go halfway around the world. A man by the name of John Weston and his family traveled from Britain to Greece and back by motor vehicle in the early 1920s. The Weston family did this trek in a US-built Commerce Motor Car Company one-ton truck with a US-built engine made by Continental Motors. You know, back when we actually made things here. The Weston family later moved to South Africa, and in 1931, they drove that very same truck from the southwestern tip of Africa all the way through Cairo and on to Great Britain. John Weston is perhaps the grandfather of modern overlanding, and he built it, not bought it. Amazingly, that truck still exists, and it can be seen at the Winterton Museum in South Africa. In 1932, explorer Ralph Bagnold and his team drove Ford Model A's across the Libyan desert. He and his team literally invented airing down. That's right. They began the practice of reducing tire pressure when driving over loose sand on that very expedition. And in this corner, wearing a three-piece suit, the godfather of airing down, Ralph Air Down Bagnold. Oh, and also, he may have been the first with another overlanding staple, The first commercially available 4x4 was the Jeep CJ2A in 1945, and it was marketed to Americans as an all-around farm workhorse. Across the pond in 1947, Maurice Wilkes, chief designer at the Rover Company, began designing a vehicle very similar to the Jeep. And by similar, I mean the prototype, nicknamed the Center Steer, was built on the Jeep chassis and Jeep axles. So the Chinese didn't even invent this whole copying other people's ideas thing. We've probably been doing it since the dawn of mankind. Yo, I am so taking that idea. Rover introduced the original Land Rover Series 1 in 1948 as a light agricultural utility vehicle. Sound familiar? Anyways, in 1949, explorer Colonel LeBlanc drove a Series 1 from Britain all the way to what is now Ethiopia. Perhaps the first overland expedition made by commercially available 4x4 vehicle. 2 years later, Autocar magazine undertook a 6,000-mile journey from Kolkata, India to Calais, France, again in a Rover Series 1. Some years later, in a bar somewhere in Hong Kong, 2 university students, one from Oxford and the other from Cambridge, made a bet on who could drive across Africa from north to south and back again the fastest.
Clearly, Cambridge is the far superior university.
That's preposterous! How dare you, sir? I challenge you to a race across the continent of Africa.
Fisticuffs would seem more efficient in regards to time, but I accept your challenge.
So, in 1954, 2 teams from the rivaling universities met in northern Africa.
Sunday, Sunday, Sunday. Monster Expedition Rally. Team Oxford versus Team Cambridge. Who will emerge victorious?
As it turns out, Oxford won that 25,000-mile race. Both teams made the journey in Land Rover Series 1 wagons. A year later, the 2 universities were at it again, but this time it would be from London to Singapore, a 19,000-mile drive. That journey would be done in reverse in 1958. 2 British soldiers who were stationed in Singapore decided to not take an airplane home at the end of their tour. Instead, they reconditioned an old Willys MB and drove all the way back to Britain. Many think of overlanding as 4-wheeled exploits, but in 1933, Max Reich, an Austrian long-distance motorcyclist, rode from Vienna to Mumbai on a 250cc motorbike through several large areas that were completely unmapped at the time. The brave individuals you heard about today were some of the pioneers of what we now call overlanding. And although few of us will probably ever do anything nearly as epic as them, we can certainly enjoy whatever overlanding journeys we're able to do. And who knows, maybe one day, one of your descendants will do some interplanetary overlanding.
Stand up with all 4 wheels off the ground there. Okay, Max, stop. Okay, I don't want to do that. Okay, excuse me.
If you enjoyed this episode of I never thought about that, let me know in the comments below. I had fun making it, and I want to do more of these. If you're new to overlanding and you just want to get started, check out this video, or tag along on one of my mellow overlanding journeys in this playlist. Thank you for watching. Always remember, destinations don't matter, the journey matters. This is Roger, over and out.